if some of you attend the Wednesday Bible class, you will know Ashlyn. If not, this is Ashlyn. So she's agreed to help us facilitate our ongoing conversation. I wanted to go back and remind us of Jay McDivitt's reminder of how we engage in conversation as Christians. That's with courage, with compassion, and with curiosity. I thought those are great words to help us. We're going to be curious about learning something, and we bring compassion, love for neighbor, as Christ calls us to do, and courage to also just be willing to tackle some tough topics if we get to that today. So our conversation today, we're going to just actually cover a handful of topics. Ashlyn was attending last week's forum with Dan Weiss as he led the group through what we call the clobber passages, the passages that have typically been used to address homosexuality. And just hope she'll give kind of a reflection rebuttal on that. Then we're going to introduce you to one of the handouts, an experience called one-on-one conversations. It's a way to grow community in. And that's a little new to me too, so we're going to learn about that together. And then the third piece, you got an article, we're going to take a little bit of time to peek into what our national church, the ELCA's social teaching statement on human sexuality, which is going to really broaden the topic of discussion. But again, we're in a learning mode with this welcoming journey, and glad you're back to learn some more. Hand it over to Ashlyn.
All right, so I kind of want to circle back on those like 6 major verses that Dan was talking about, because I think those hurdles are a big thing that holds us back from moving forward in conversation and like small group interaction. So I kind of want to open up to you guys if you guys have any questions about that, or what you guys kind of took away from Dan's talk last Sunday. You guys have any thoughts?
I thought it was enlightening that the statements are very ambiguous as to what their meanings were.
Yeah, and I think we kind of have to like go back to that often in Scripture, because context is a huge thing when it comes to moving forward, or even politics and early America. Like things back then are not the same now, and so we kind of have to remember that, like what's evolving, what are we doing, and how are we practicing our faith. So some of those big verses that are talking about homosexuality versus sexual immorality are totally different. And sometimes I think that's a hard thing to start picking apart when someone's throwing something at you. So I don't know if you guys have any questions or comments on that. I'm just here to facilitate.
I just thought it was great to think about what he said is don't focus on the little things. You know, it's almost like don't sweat the small stuff. Focus on the bigger picture. And that he called the Bible more like an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
And you can use it any way you want. Like statistics, you can use it twisted however you want it. But to get back to the bigger picture.
Yeah, something we use when we're discussing the Bible is you major on the majors and minor on the minors. So there are some bigger things like love, forgiveness, respect that are major points in Christianity. Some of the small things about braiding your hair or what you eat or how you do your Sunday can be minor things, but people blow those out of proportion. And so it's how do we interact with those kind of topics that are hot buttons, that are bombs for us, and divide people, because really all that does is separate people from what you think and one side of the line and the other. And so what I think the bigger point is how do we meet in the middle and focus on like what brings us together versus what tears us apart. So I don't know if there's certain other verses that you guys know about or anything like that, but there's a lot of them, even in the New Testament, where you recall Old Testament scriptures that divide Paul and from Peter and different things like that. And so even some of the New Testament stuff gets a little bit tricky because text without context is a con. So if you don't know what's going on in the first century, if you don't know what they're drawing back to, that can be a little confusing for people, and you can take it out of context and really go with it. And you can go down this one-way train of hate and fear and separation versus what does this mean and why was this even written in the first place? Is to call a group of people together to unite them and bound them. Yeah. Sure.
Oh, I just found it interesting that the words heterosexual and homosexual are very new in history. Late 1800s, I think you said
Yeah.
those words.
Yeah, even sodomy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So you have to keep that when you're reading the Bible, that
Yeah.
that was,
In the scripture, it doesn't say heterosexual people should do this.
Uh-huh.
There's nothing like that. We see male and female, but we don't see, and we only use homosexuality as an act. It's like the big thing that was called out. But yeah, I think a lot of the language is a big thing that we have to understand.
so the people who are throwing the clobber passage are inferring the meaning into the scripture.
Yeah.
Is it-
Yeah, exactly. So you're coming up with a 21st or even a 19th century term for a thing that's 2,000 plus, 3,000 plus years old. It doesn't work.
I think, too, as Christians, we struggle with how we hold each other accountable as to whether we actually it's our job to judge each other.
Sure.
And I think sometimes those passages are just used to judge.
Yeah, and judge, and what's the outcome of judge?
Right.
Is, you know, you're over here,
Division.
yeah, division. And so there's other things that divide the church, and how do we come back together and not judge one another? How do we love our neighbor? How do we do that? And if something is to be called out, or if someone is in the wrong, how do we gracefully pull them back in? That's like the more interesting thing than yelling at each other with signs. Any other thoughts? Cool. I don't know what else you want to circle back on.
If you have any other thoughts or?
Anyone? Okay. We can go into the one-on-one stuff.
Yeah.
For the statement, please.
Well, thank you, Ashley. So the one-on-ones is a suggestion coming out of the Reconciling Christ, or our Lutheran version, the Reconciling Works organization, which has been working with churches for 20-some years to help us create a welcome in our community to people identified in the LGBTQ plus community. And one of the tools they're suggesting is learning, but the other is engaging in what they call one-on-one conversations, a way to build community, to just build that care for each other and understanding. And so that our first reaction to someone is not judgment or I disagree with you and argue, but our first response is, I really care for you and I'm trying to understand what you're saying and your perspective. I'm just curious in the room if some of you in whether at work or other organizations have engaged in one-on-one meetings or visits or have taught them. Anybody familiar with that tool? Oh, good, a handful of you. So I may just refer to your experience out of that. And you'll see in my handout is an invitation to really kind of just an outline. I'm not going to go through that, but I'm going to ask Brian to show you what I thought was kind of a humorous version of a one-to-one meeting. Good. Gotta come up and use the clicker.
Join Planet Fitness today for $1 down, $10
Ads. Sounds like my TV.
I've never ever been in a ball pit before. You've never been in a ball pit?
No.
You gotta go.
No, I've seen them, but I've never been in one.
You know, I remember these ball pits because I just grew up in them.
Alright, so let's see. Okay, this is a good one. Share 3 things on your bucket list. First one is to go skydiving.
I want to go skydiving.
Have you ever had those dreams where you're just like floating and you're flying and everything? Scuba diving is just exactly that.
Don't you get afraid of drowning or being underwater or getting attacked by an octopus or any of those things? I want to learn curling.
What is it?
Like that Winter Olympics sport.
Oh, alright, where you slide the...
Yeah, and then it's like bowling and sweeping.
Find one thing you have in common. Do you play sports?
Not currently. I play soccer, so.
Soccer?
Yeah.
Alright.
Actually, I play the drums. Do you play any instruments?
I quit everything I ever tried.
Actually, fun fact, these aren't real teeth.
Really? Oh my god! I can't wait.
Oh my gosh.
You don't even understand. I swear to God, I feel like someone planted us here for this reason. Just
Describe the first time you fell in love.
Oh, I think it was kindergarten. I don't remember his name, but he was beautiful.
I was in the Navy. You were in the Navy? And my husband was in the Navy. Long story short, before he ever kissed me or we were ever really together, he told me he loved me. 24 years later, we're more in love and we're better friends than even from the very beginning.
That's true love in its finest.
Talk about someone who inspires you.
Is it alright to talk about somebody that's a religious character?
Yeah, why not? This is our ball pit. We can talk about whoever we want, right?
Jesus.
All right.
Just my peers. They're all creative in their own ways and have their own realities and own lessons. I just grow from everybody else's as well as my own. Martin Luther King, I think, because the fact that we're sitting in this box together is a big deal. You know who inspires me, believe it or not, is my daughter. She is everything I ever wanted to be.
All right. Talk about the experience that changed your life. Oh, that's a good one. After my wife decided that it was time that we split, I started to have a different perspective on life. I saw women differently. I saw relationships differently. I think I became more appreciative of women.
How old did you say you are? 20? Yeah. Okay. At the age of 21, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And it pulled the rug out from all my plans. It really changes the way you look at things.
My grandmother has it.
Who does?
My grandmother.
There's our comment.
We found the comment.
We found the comment.
That's why I was still here. We found the comment.
Oh, create a secret handshake. Okay.
Okay, but nothing was spit. Rainbow hands. So this.
And then whoever gets on the top gets a flag. Oh, yeah, I forgot what it is.
And then like maybe a little twitch in the middle. 1, 2, 1, 2. I did. All right, we did it.
That was awesome. I actually had a lot of fun. I was a little bit nervous because normally you don't hang out with strangers in ball pits. I got to learn something.
It was really nice to meet you.
You too.
Nice to meet you. I'm really impressed by you. I was worried that I would start trying to do like a mom. I don't know if I did.
No. No, you didn't. Trust me. You did good.
So gay, subside.
Good, I'm glad you laughed. So one-on-ones, I hope you get the spirit of it, that it's just sitting down and taking a little more time to have a conversation with someone. I'll be honest, in 30 plus years in parish ministry, we are notorious for going to meetings and leaving meetings, to going to worship, saying hi, having a cup of coffee and leaving. And how precious it is to build community by spending a little more time just listening, and so with or without a ball pit, right? It is really optional. So that's the idea, that if we are continuing to build community, which really has Very in general, for whatever reason, it's the health of an organization or a congregation, is to spend more time just getting to know each other. So I am putting out to you a summer challenge to think of maybe 3 people that you would invite to a 30, 45-minute conversation. And again, what is it about? It's just getting to know each other. As you can see, they talk about anything and everything, and then some sincere things were being shared, some connections were being made, from false teeth to MS, you know, sharing a common disease. And so, right, can't you just feel how that helps you connect with someone? And once you have that, you know, our empathy and our care naturally expands. Again, it's not an interview of nonstop questions. I'm not even giving you questions. It's simply get to know each other. Think about, you know, tell me more about it. Where did you grow up? What do you love? You could ask, in our context here of today, you know, what is your connection with the LGBTQ plus community? You know, how are you thinking about that? And simply say, thank you, I've enjoyed getting to know you. Those of you who have experience with one-on-ones, tell me what you've been coached or taught about that, or what context you put that in. There were a number of you. Herb?
Yes, we had our neighbors, 2 gentlemen, were gay, and it was no big deal. I think about it, our children were growing up very young at the time, but you know, in my upbringing at home, the subject really never ever came up pro or con to any extent, except one relative that we had that she probably was lesbian, but that never was a big deal. And I find it interesting now, we get so excited about it and discuss it and analyze it. And in our setting, it just never was a big deal.
They were neighbors and you got to know them and,
yeah,
and cared about them. Great.
The one fellow was a hospital administration. The other fellow was a more art-oriented person. He did displays and windows, etc. But we never said, oh my gosh, we're gonna watch the children, they're out, or anything like that. It was never.
Good.
It just was never a big deal.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else have experience with the one-on-ones?
I don't know if it's really one-on-ones, but just in organization I'm in at work, I think we talk about being able to be vulnerable and honest, but in a safe space, so that, you know, you listen for understanding, and then let the other person, and then vice versa, right? And then you agree to kind of keep that. You're not going out and going back to your peers and going, hey, guess what this person said?
You read off this
You
list.
make that agreement that it's a safe space, and to be open, and to try to make yourself vulnerable, because that's how you get to know people.
And that's in a work setting? That is
So
co-working,
I'm a
sorry.
member of the LGBTQ, they call it an employee resource group.
Okay.
And through that, I'm taking a class, and then you kind of agree in the group that you're gonna be open and honest and vulnerable.
Yes, I've done one-on-ones over the years through MICA, Milwaukee Inner City Congregations Allies for Hope. And the one-on-one is a means by which we build community and learn what it is that draws people to the social justice work at MICA. And Pastor Matt used to have an expression, pay attention to what breaks your heart and also what gives you life. And there's a reason why people are drawn to this class. There's a reason why people are drawn to organizations like MICA. There's a reason why we come to St. Matthew's. And scratching below the surface to learn the story of each person, or some of the people in the community, deepens relationships. And it's the death of a community for people to be only in superficial relationship with each other. And we can't be in deep relationship with everybody, but there are people we're drawn to in different communities that we should follow the spirit and get to know better. And it's amazing, in an hour you can get to know a person very, very well. It doesn't take a lot of time, it just takes some intentionality. Part of the secret to effective one-on-ones are open-ended questions. and not feeling nervous that you have to ask the next question. There are certain principles that help to guide the conversation. And I would say in this community of faith, the Lord is always present in a one-on-one and guides the conversation to where His will is, and His will is for life and healthy relationships. So.
Ashlyn, you want to share from your experience too?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things to remember is like you're in the room for a reason. You want to get coffee with this person for a reason. So if you establish respect for each other, mutual identity, like one thing doesn't need to set the conversation apart. But if you come in it with, hey, I like this person, we both are moms at the school, or hey, we both go to the community center together, there's a reason you want to hang out and know this person more. And so when you have that respect and that depth, then you can go into the harder conversations and challenge one another. Because there is something beautiful about having different opinions and still being okay with each other. Because people can come from different angles and different upbringings, but I think that's where we can both grow internally and in our community if we both have that respect. And so if you're in a one-on-one on coffee and you're like, I see it this way, I see it this way, you can be like, I see what you're saying, and move on. You don't always have to be like, and this is it, end of the world. When sometimes that is what a lot of people do. Like, I'm drawing a line, we are here and here and we can't agree. We gotta bring out the lawyers, we can't be friends. So I think it's those smaller things when you really have that respect and love for one another that go there, because that's what's bringing you together. You both have kids at a school, you both have a retirement community, you both like going on long walks, whatever the case is that brings you together, that will grow you further than dividing each other. So in any coffee situation, any one-on-one where you're asking questions, find what's bringing you together before you tear each other apart. Do you have any experiences of that when you're like in a coffee conversation and you did not see it go the way you wanted it? Have you guys had any of those before? Yeah? What was your experience like?
No, she said.
Oh, you said it?
Well, it's usually something my husband has said. The friends go, wah!
Or anyone else with those kind of experiences? Yeah, so sometimes they'll have, if you're challenging on this one-on-one conversation with 3 different people, I would actually like challenge like different ages, different parts of town, different, like find something else. Because it's really easy to get coffee with a friend and pretend it's a one-on-one. But really it's to engage the community and get to know somebody else of a different situation than yours, because that's how you can really understand more of who the church is and how we can live out being the church.
What questions or comments do you have? Just go ahead, chime in.
My mother. And as trivial as when I was growing up, I was not allowed, for example, to play with. I was not allowed to go to a birthday party of a Roman Catholic. My sister, 6 years younger, married. You know, and it was fun, and there were other issues, but sitting back now, how my mother developed, you know, I mean, and we talked, and I said, Mom, you can't be that, you know, on these issues, but I didn't draw the line.
Yeah, it is, that chasm's so funny because it's like Catholic and Lutheran, but really it's Christ. Yeah. And like what's separating you are these like, oh, communion, oh, you do this, like, what? It's Jesus that's bringing you together, and then 6 years later, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I feel like as I get older and older, especially with issues of women, you know, how the lines have just disappeared.
Yeah, women equality, all that, women speaking at a podium at a church, unheard of years ago. Yeah. Thoughts, comments?
So I like what she said about like find something you have in common, and the way I've learned to understand it is how are we alike? Because I think it's fear that drives us apart with our strongly held opinions or beliefs or whatever our stance might be. So if I'm looking for ways that we're alike, then I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of what you're going to say, or I'm not afraid of the potential confrontation, because you get that churning in your gut. You're like, oh, I have an opinion about this, and I'm going to say something. You know, I just constantly try to bring myself back to how are we alike, Yeah, and that, like you said, there's the church and there's Jesus in that common denominator space. So, it seems to help.
Yeah, and with the likeness, it's like people hold multiple identities. So if you're more than just a mom or a Republican or a Democrat or a single person or whatever, so kind of come back to that, not just even in the LGBTQA plus arena, you're more than just one identity or how you live your life. There's so many flags you fly, but like subtly, where you shop, what you do, where you eat your chicken sandwich from, it all makes a difference, and it says something about you.
So again, the invitation is to consider doing 3 one-to-ones. Again, maybe someone you've seen in this forum, someone in the congregation that we're going to build community, or maybe it's someone outside of St. Matthew's. It's up to you. And somehow we're going to figure out in the fall maybe a way to debrief your experiences, but to keep that conversation going. But I hope you see the point of this is to build community, to build some of that care and respect, because I'm sure we'll get to some of the differences sooner or later. Okay, good.
Did
All
you
right.
go through that statement?
I'm just going to hand that out to you and see if you have any thoughts, questions.
I just have a question on logistics. Do we have a list going of people who are interested in this? I mean, I would be interested in kind of a randomness of, as a way to get to know somebody in the congregation, so not to put work on anybody.
Yeah, I
but
didn't structure it that
if we had a
tightly.
list of who might
People
be
open to
interested
doing
and just,
one-to-ones?
yeah, pick somebody that I don't even know, just as a way to do the process and get to know somebody better in church, as a thought.
And I'm willing to sit in the ball pit.
I'd like you to meet Ashlyn. There's a ball pit at the let me think about that, and just to kind of cue that up a little bit for you all. I was hoping you could just look around the room and see the spirit moving. But
so
Dave.
just my take on it, like how a list might help bring the interested parties like that understanding that what they're getting into is a one-on-one. I would hate for someone to think that like a friendship is being pursued and then maybe it's this like kind of slightly other goal.
Okay.
You know, like hey, I thought we were gonna
and
become
next
friends,
thing you know,
and it's-
and we need you in the tech team and
well, oh no,
volunteer.
no, volunteering's cool, but like, you know, just so like when folks sit down to a one-on-one, they both kind of know what the rules are.
Maybe I can figure out a way to send out an email and sign up.
In the RIC toolkit is like a breakdown on how to do those one-on-ones.
Yeah.
And like some of the motivations are, this isn't ending, the goal isn't friendship or the goal isn't,
Right.
yeah, it's conversation. Yeah.
And it's trying to be here in this, spelling this out. But yeah, let's see if we can do that, if that will help encourage you. Yeah.
As a suggestion, Pastor Karen, we could send a piece of paper among us now in the next 15 minutes, and if people wanted to, they could add their name.
Paper sign up. I love it. Let's do
Okay.
it. You got paper.
I'll take it.
Thank you, Sue.
Thanks, Sue.
Okay, good. Well, let's move on. We've got about 25 minutes to introduce you to your other handout. From the ELCA, our national church actually creates these documents, and they're called social teaching statements. And they're quite involved. And there is one on human sexuality that was published in 2009. It is created by a committee that will get input from the process, and getting input from the whole national church, multiple places. That document is brought to a church-wide assembly where it is voted on. And what does it serve as? This document on human sexuality is 48 pages. So if you're walking into the ELC and you say, is homosexuality right or wrong? You are not going to get a straight up answer. Our Bible study is telling us you're not going to, it just doesn't spin that simply. And any issue around is gay marriage, is living together before marriage, is divorce, and there are social teaching statements on multiple topics. If you're curious, go to elca.org, look at social teaching statements, and you will find lots of important topics. But this handout I thought was helpful. What purpose do they serve? The church is developing these statements that will guide the life of the church as an institution and inform the conscience of its members in the spirit of Christian liberty. That is, so what is that saying? It's giving us guidance, but it's not saying you have to believe this in order to be a part of the ELCA. It's saying this is what we collectively are believing and practicing in our life together, and I want you to know that. And that is the liberty of faith, that we can come and say, I don't agree with everything, but I still think I'm a Lutheran and I still want to be part of this community of faith, right? ELCA social statements are teaching, so they're here for us to study and learn for, but they're also policy documents that provide a broad framework to assist us in thinking about and discussing social issues in the context of faith and life. So I know, the original document came out of the conversation in the ELCA was around, will we ordain openly gay or lesbian people and bring them into our roster? I started in ministry. It was back in the military used that don't tell, don't ask kind of policy around it. And the ELCA, there were churches that said, no, we're going to be open and being supportive about these excellent pastors who also happen to be gay or lesbian. And we want them as our rostered leader. And that began over 30 years ago, this conversation in the ELCA. And so this document really is there to, so eventually the ELCA said, yes, we are going to ordain gay and lesbian candidates. We're welcoming them to be married. I mean, there were all these steps along the way in the process of identifying what our policy would be as a national church. So you can see how what we learn, what we understand, and what we discover shapes how we live together as a community. You can follow the same kind of track with ordained women. I mean, it was a very similar, parallel kind of a discernment process. And so we come up with this social teaching statement, and I put Ashley on the spot to help me kind of sort this out a little bit. If you turn to the back page, this was actually a 3-page condensed article of the 48-page document, which you're happy to go on elca.org and read the whole thing. It's available to you. But this was, of all people, the Lutheran Women Today, our women's national organization, had a publication, and they put in their periodical this 3-page kind of summary document, which is also on the ELCA's website. And I thought it at least was helpful for us in our short time to kind of get this outline of what is actually in this document. And I wanted to introduce it to you today. We know we're kind of going into the summer, and perhaps in the fall we can revisit this document. We have a member of our congregation whose brother actually served on this committee and might be willing to come and share his experience of coming together and writing 48-page document by committee, by getting input from the large denomination that we are. And so we thought that could be an interesting next step to come back to it. We wanted to introduce this to you as another sense of learning, and really the document now is broadening the conversation into all of human sexuality that it has many more issues that the church is concerned about. I wanted to, just in that introduction, maybe Ashlyn and I'll just kind of do these bullet points and you can walk through the document, but you'll see a distinctly Lutheran approach is always undergirding this document. The first is that we are justified by grace through faith. Why would that be important? To talk anything about our life together. Grace is the point, right? There's always forgiveness. Is there any sin beyond God's forgiveness? I always ask confirmation students this one. Can you ask forgiveness at your dying deathbed? And are we sure that God will forgive you? Even if you're a mass murderer. I mean, you know, we all ask all these kinds of questions. And it's like, man, that doesn't seem right. But boy, God's grace is that big. And thank God, because I am living in that forgiveness every day, right? For whatever I've done or failed to do. And so we know that that's there. We also can talk about our love of neighbor, our Christian freedom in service of the neighbor. That you know, we're free to hang out with people who are sinners, if we want to pull that language up. And that's, we don't come with judgment, but we come with love. And that's why Jesus was always being ridiculed. You know, he's hanging around with sinners and people that others thought, you know, and that's exactly where he wanted to be, in fellowship with them. Talking about God's continuing creation. I just need to go back and understand that there's still God's ongoing work in creation. And what does that mean? We will talk about, there is the law. What purpose does the law have, as we understand, for us Lutherans? Do we teach the 10 Commandments? Do we uphold the 10 Commandments? And there are two important purposes. The law reveals our sin, right? We come every Sunday in worship and confess our sin. We say what we've done and what we have failed to do, and we ask for God's forgiveness. That is part of who we are. But it's helping us recognize it so that we might be freed of that sin, not to sit and beat ourselves up about it, but to ask God for forgiveness, and to, the other is constrain our behavior is a term that the law serves. It's like, okay, you know, I choose to try to discern right and wrong and live according to that, but that has a place in our life together. But then we go on to, talks about serving our neighbor, and of course, doing some work of discerning what is right and wrong, and how do we live in community. It's big stuff, right? But it's foundational and important. The next part, I'm going to have Ashlyn see what she thinks about this, talks about trust is a big piece of human sexuality, that they spent some time talking about that.
Yeah, so the next part, the trust in human sexuality part, the complexity of human sexuality, like, just take a pause right there. It's hard to get our head around. People are individuals and experience different situations regardless of their sexuality. So people are so complex. And then you put the word human sexuality on it, and it's just one part of it. And so you need to be able to trust yourself and trust that the person that you're talking to, or whatever context, you have to be able to have this mutual trust. Trust of yourself and trust of the other. So that's the same thing as the social trust and the common good. When you have the abuse or mistrust of somebody, you can feel that right away. That's not common good. That's the failure to trust and respect one another. And then human sexuality and our calling to establish trust. It's not just given to trust someone. You usually have to see their trustworthiness. It develops, it grows. If a kid disobeys, they have a chance to get your trust back. We always have that for each person every day. You can lose someone's trust and you can gain someone's trust. And I think that's kind of important when it comes to vulnerability of sexuality and human sexuality, as it is in the Lutheran Church. Next point, sexuality and the social structures that enhance social trust. So marriage is this amazing covenant that when you do these vows or do this thing, that you are trusting the other person to care for one another and love one another out of trust and respect. Lifelong monogamous same gender relationships, I think, are also the same thing. Because when we were talking about clobber passages, this isn't what those clobber passages are talking about. So I think it's really cool that it's addressed in the social statement. Loving family is the ground and source for social trust. that in these family contexts, in these monogamous long-term relationships, that we can grow young people, help raise them under trust and knowledge of their own identity and human sexuality, and protecting the children, that whole structure that way for youth and trusting relationships, especially in the day of, you know, all this taught in schools and stuff like that. I think this is a really cool thing if we trust ourselves and have that love and respect for our kids, that we can protect them from whatever society that isn't uplifting and good, that we can help and teach and raise our kids. All right, let's go down the line. Sexuality and trust in relationships. Sexuality and self, I think a lot of that has to do with knowing yourself. Obviously, if you can identify, some people don't put labels on it. They're just like, this is who I am, this is how I live, and that's their self. They can do that. You don't have to identify, you don't have to go meet your one-on-one, be like, this is who I am, and these are my identities, and this is how I practice my life. You can just practice your life, it's fine. Gender and friendships, the trustworthiness in there, I think it's self-evident. Commitment and sexuality, I think that goes back to the monogamous long-term. Like, if you don't have commitment and understanding and trust, that's where you can fail. And I think in the Lutheran statement it talks about not cool, being promiscuous and all that stuff, because the trust just isn't there. If you're just doing your own thing a whole bunch of different ways, you aren't actually having that commitment and that trust relationship. Sexual intimacy and adult cohabitation. I read about 39 of the 48 pages. It's really redundant, but it's really detailed to the fact that it understands in society right now, it makes most sense for two single people to live together financially, to get resources, to get benefits. But in the Lutheran Church, they recognize that, but also recognize the value and importance of marriage and that monogamous long-term relationship. So not just the social benefit of cohabitation, but really the established trust and that longevity of a relationship before living together. Sexuality and social responsibility. I don't really know much about this, but it just says sexuality in society, sexuality and public ministry.
Abuse and public sex trafficking
Okay.
and all that kind of
sure.
societal problems.
Yeah. So abuse in general. So if anyone in a power or position that uses and abuses their power sexually or even emotionally, would be terrible. Conclusion, human sexuality and moral discernment. That's a good one. Because moral judgment comes in a bunch of different ways, but in the church we hold on to it as a certain way. So however you practice your sexuality, coming back to that moral discernment of what's right, what's good, what's uplifting, is really interesting there. And it lands on the fact that we always need mercy when we screw up in that, and we'll always continually need that grace to keep going on and learning about ourselves and others. So I trust that.
Yeah. I really appreciate too, it's saying it, human sexuality, while it's private, there's something private about it, there's something also very public about it. And I think as a pastor officiating, for example, at marriages, people are gathering as witnesses to support that couple, to encourage them in their commitment to each other, and that we do that communally. We care about, just if every organization has employment practices, that there isn't abuse going on with employer-employee relationships. As churches, we're reviewing again just our child protection policies, how we gather as a community, how we welcome children and adults to working and living and sharing life together. And so you can see and why we would even care about. So if it's economically more advantageous for a couple to live together, and to tell you how many children I've talked to over the years whose 80-year-old parents move in together and they're like, what? They're just trying to understand what that was a financial arrangement, right? So what is it about our society that maybe there's some changes in our laws that are prohibitive. So you can see how this begins to just wander all over the place. What are you thinking? What's your reaction? Why would the ELCA document want to go so broad in talking about human sexuality? Do you find that helpful or more confusing?
Well, helpful, because I'm trying to gather around my entire head, because I'm in the South Missouri Senate.
Yeah, he's freshly a long-term member of a Missouri Synod church and trying to understand another denomination, another Lutheran denomination, just what are the differences, right?
Just trying to figure it out.
So that goes into the curiosity point. We just stay curious.
Be curious. That's a good place to be, yeah.
I think it's so important to think outside the box. My experience, Missouri Synod Church, we followed the English non-geographical district because we could be more, some would say more liberal. And this is going on over 30 years ago. We started communion. We were looking for ways to encourage our youth. And the group was, we decided to have First Communion. And of course, some said, oh, you're like the Catholic Church. Well, that meant nothing. But we had people that would say, oh my gosh. But we did research only to find that in the early church, the finger was dipped in the wine and put on the lips of the infant. And so we went ahead with that. And one of our students who was in one of the other parochial schools, Missouri Synod, was kicked out of school when they were telling how they had communion. And we had already prepared our response that we are way more conservative than you. We are Orthodox, and we explained the history behind it. And the discussion stopped like a clam closing its shell. But the idea, think a little differently. Don't get stuck in a rut like, how could that make sense? And I find that's the hardest problem. Even I think about, well, Joanne and I take a train trip every year, and we find that we get into discussions with people I think they would not even share with their mother, because your friend is anonymity. You think you will never ever see each other again, so you're free to speak how you feel. And I've experienced from the point where once I had an hour-and-a-half conversation with a Vietnam vet who still had huge PTSD stuff. And it started out with just some friendly words across the aisle and it morphed into that this was the first time he was able to ever travel on a train even. And you have those, but the idea was, he probably says, I'll never see that guy again, I'm free to speak. So it's rather interesting. So we'll get our 3 discussions this summer.
There you go.
I just have a comment. I think it's nice to have, I haven't read through 48 pages of it, but a little bit of guidance when you're hearing from both extreme sides of flags, churches, are bad towards these people, or, the holding of the signs of don't do this is extreme, like both extreme sides. Like this is a bit of a, what does my church really have a statement on? What can I reference instead of hearing one end and the other end? Like maybe the pendulum swings this way super far, it swings this way super far, and this is a little bit more
Gives
of
you another voice
common ground with people that you
versus the loud ones on the extremes.
Yeah.
I kind of also think there's so much there, because I don't think love is supposed to have boundaries or be in a box. So I think it allows for a greater expression and expansion of love, which is, I'm pretty sure we learned that from Jesus. So it just kind of, it makes sense to me that it would be so detailed in how, how relationships or how love or sexuality, whatever, can happen, because it shouldn't be kept in a rule-ordered box.
And I think it's important to have good sources of information. I think a lot of people, particularly on social media, they're spouting or resharing something that they've not researched. They have no idea if it's true or false. So if you have some place to go where somebody's done a lot of research, and you can you take what you need and you want, but you have that source of information. I think a lot of people join a church sometimes, not because of what the statement is, just, oh, it's convenient, or I know somebody who goes there. You know, and it depends on where you live. I have a friend in North Carolina who joined a Missouri, she grew up here, joined a Missouri Synod church, because there aren't that many Lutheran churches down there. And so, but they're very different there than they would be up here.
Nancy?
Just the fact that we're ELCA Lutherans, we go back to the theology of Luther, who was himself a flawed person in some of his beliefs. But the greatest thing I think that he's taught us is grace. And since we're all living in that grace, we should do likewise and extend that grace to every person that you meet.
That's great.
I think that's part of an issue with being, if you tell somebody they're Lutheran, you're Lutheran, who has no idea that there are different synods and ideology, they're like, if they've had a bad experience, you're like, oh, you're one of those. I mean, how can we all come from Luther but still, you know?
Right, yeah, and I you know, I absolutely grace, but one of the things we learn about grace is it doesn't mean nothing matters, that you do whatever you want. That's not what grace is either about. But I love that these documents help us continue to talk to our children about their own growing human sexuality and their expression of it. Whatever gender they identify or who they're attracted to, but we can have that conversation. We can talk about their expression with friendships and what does that mean. We can have a conversation with our young adults, look if they are looking to have a marriage partner, and you know, to you know, what marriage is still being held up as something valuable, and what is it about it that's coming out of this document is it is the ultimate place to express that trust and commitment and that public commitment to that. So I think marriage still has a place in our culture. And so how do you talk about that, not as condemnation, but as still something we value and in the community? So I find some of these old morals are still have a place in the conversation. We haven't thrown them all out, but what does that mean? It isn't, you know, usually we lead with judgment. Oh, they're living together. I mean, this was the old school. They're living together, they're not married. You know, we're really uncomfortable with that. Or now it's just they're living together and it doesn't matter. You said, well, you want that to be a meaningful, trustworthy conversation. Yeah, that's where I kind of digress in this. Some thoughts back there?
Oh, I just wanted to say that I think it's important that we're just appreciating the fact that this document exists. Like all of the, I mean, we've all been on committees. We know how hard it is to come to any kind of consensus. Like the fact that they came up with this and they dove into this and they did research and they did but with the spirit of love. Like how can we as a church approach this topic and help our congregants to really understand sort of our basis. So just appreciating the fact that this exists out there for when you need to reference it.
Yeah, and again, with courage that St. Matthew's, for whatever reason, these past couple months has wanted to talk about this subject and have the courage to bring this up, I think is good, and we want to keep that conversation going. I see Jeff and John are here. Do you guys want to give the announcement about the other side of the one-on-one invitation is also my handout is an invitation to two things. Well, our married couple here, Jeff and John, our staff couple, are willing to do two, I started to call them movie nights, but they're conversations. You'll see them, one in June, one July. They may or may not be popcorn, may or may not be a film. Tell us what it is.
She's really not sure what we're doing. We're kind of sure what we're doing. So, we invite you to two sessions, evening sessions over the summer, where we're just going to sit down and talk. We're going to share You've heard a lot of Bible stuff right now in the past club, and the Human Sexuality Statement. We expect everyone to read that before you meet with us. meet us. But what's really important in all of this is the person. The one-on-one conversation brings that together, and it's about people. So what Jeff and I want to do is share our stories, and hopefully you can bring your stories to us and share with each other on these nights. That's basically what it is.
Your
just
personal stories.
It's going to be our personal stories. Yeah, we're gonna. There it is. So, and we feel that when you get to know somebody, when you get to hear a story, you're gonna relate to it in a better way and understand things in a better way. And we are going to talk about the biblical side of this and the church side, because certainly Jeff's background is a Southern Baptist and Roman Catholic. We just watched the movie last night, again, For the Bible Tells Me So. So that's a very good documentary that deals with this issue too. And growing up Catholic, the two major sins that will send you right to hell are homosexuality and suicide. I didn't know those two. I knew the suicide one was one, but that's what they purport. And so when we hear these stories of Jeff and John growing up in this, how did we deal with it and end up married, working at a church? To be continued.
The other invitation is our synod annually hosts a Pride worship. That's the other invitation. It's at Ascension Church in the Boulevard. Oh, good. Sue's got some more prettier handouts for you too. Prettier. Thank you for coming, and look forward to hearing more about the one-on-ones and the summer storytelling. Thank you. Thank you, Ashlyn.